Avon Barksdale has 10 stairwells and 5 high-rises going 24/7 with the open code.
Beloved, broken, and gone. The lost legends of The Wire. When The Wire first aired in 2002, it didn't scream for attention. It whispered. It crept in quietly like the corners of Baltimore it so ruthlessly portrayed. And yet, it became a revolution, not because of explosions or special effects, but because of raw truth, layered characters, and a merciless lens on American institutions. It wasn't just a TV show. It was a reflection, a warning, a prophecy. Its brilliance lay not only in the writing, but in the faces that brought that writing to life. Faces that were tired, cracked, bruised by the world they lived in, just like the characters they played. Some were already legends. Others became legends because of this very series. But in the years since The Wire ended, many of those iconic actors have disappeared from the credits of life itself. They are gone, some quietly, others tragically, but all far too soon. What made The Wire terrifyingly beautiful was its refusal to lie. The show didn't spare its characters from pain or consequence. And life didn't spare its actors either. Behind the scenes, these stars carried demons, battled addiction, faced poverty, endured systemic injustice, and still gave performances that shook audiences to the bone. They portrayed the underbelly of society not just as actors, but often as survivors of it. And so today, we ask a haunting question. What happened to the brilliant souls behind those unforgettable characters? Who were they, beyond the screen? What led them to The Wire? And what haunted them after the cameras stopped rolling? MichaelKWilliams, Robert F. Chu, Reg E. Cathy, Melvin Williams, and others, each a chapter in a tragic, beautiful story that refuses to be forgotten. In this tribute, we dive deep into the lives and deaths of the stars who helped shape The Wire into the masterpiece it is. We explore their rise, their storms, their struggles, and the shadows that followed them, right until the end. If you, like us, feel a strange chill whenever Omar walks down an empty street, or a lump in your throat when Proposition Joe delivers a quiet threat, stay with us. Hit that subscribe button and follow us into the forgotten corridors of The Wire, where the lines between fiction and reality blurred, and the price of greatness was often paid in silence. MichaelKWilliams, the tragic heart of The Wire. He didn't just play Omar Little. He became him. The trench coat, the shotgun, the whistle. It all belonged to a man who walked between fear and myth. But behind that fearless, unforgettable character stood a man with his own war-torn heart. MichaelKWilliams was born on November 22, 1966, in Brooklyn, New York. He wasn't born into comfort. Raised by a Bahamian mother in the notorious housing projects of East Flatbush, Michael grew up surrounded by danger, dreams, and survival. Before acting, he was a dancer. He appeared in music videos with Madonna and George Michael. He even toured with Genuine. But his life took a sharp, brutal turn when he was slashed in the face with a razor during a bar fight on his 25th birthday. The scar that would define Omar was real. That jagged line across his face made him both feared and fascinating. It also made him visible. Tupac Shakur saw a photo of Michael and insisted he play his brother in Bullet, 1996. That's where it began. By the time he was cast in The Wire in 2002, Michael was 36, a man already marked by life. Omar Little, the gay stick-up man with a code of ethics in a lawless world, became a cult icon. He was both predator and protector. The streets respected him. Audiences loved him. Barack Obama once said Omar was his favorite character on television. But that praise came at a cost. Michael couldn't always leave Omar behind. He once admitted that during the height of filming The Wire, he was battling a severe cocaine addiction. He'd film during the day and disappear into the streets at night, buying drugs in the very neighborhoods the show depicted. The line between character and reality blurred dangerously. Yet he never stopped pushing himself. After The Wire, he took on more complex roles: Chalky White in Boardwalk Empire, Montrose in Lovecraft Country, and real-life civil rights figure Ken Jones in When We Rise. He was nominated for 5 Primetime Emmy Awards. But behind the camera, the demons never truly left him. On September 6, 2021, MichaelKWilliams was found dead in his Brooklyn apartment. A deadly cocktail of fentanyl, heroin, And cocaine silenced one of the most haunting voices of his generation. He was 54. The news sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. He wasn't just another actor lost to addiction. He was a symbol of brilliance born from pain and destroyed by it. To those who watched The Wire, Omar remains immortal. But to those who knew Michael, the scar wasn't just on his face, it was on his soul. He once said, "I used to think that my scars made me less of a man. But now I realize they're what make me who I am." MichaelKWilliams never truly escaped the streets. But in every role he played, he gave them a voice. And in The Wire, he gave them a legend. Robert F. Chu, the quiet power behind the game. In a series filled with chaos, bullets, betrayal, and noise, Proposition Joe was calm, calculated. He spoke softly, but his words cut deeper than a gunshot. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't brutal. He was smart. And the man who brought him to life, Robert F. Chu, mirrored that quiet brilliance, both on screen and off. Robert was born on December 28, 1960, in Baltimore, Maryland. Unlike many actors who stumbled into the city's stories from outside, Robert was Baltimore. He studied music and theater at Morgan State University, and long before he made his name on television. He was a teacher, a mentor, a guiding voice for countless young actors who would later find their way to The Wire, including kids who had never seen a stage before. When David Simon cast him as Proposition Joe, Robert wasn't a Hollywood name. He wasn't even interested in fame. He was a teacher at the Arena Players, a local African-American theater company. But when the cameras rolled, he became something unforgettable. He played the East Side kingpin with a tired wisdom, a man who knew how to survive in a world that ate people alive. He didn't need to yell. He just needed to negotiate. He was 42 when he stepped into that role in 2002. And from that moment, audiences were drawn to him, not because he demanded attention, but because he earned it. Prop Joe wasn't based on a true criminal, but he felt more real than most documentaries. Robert's performance was slow-burn genius, layered, human, and terrifying in its authenticity. Off-screen, he was the opposite of a kingpin. He didn't chase parties or fame. He stayed in Baltimore. He kept teaching. In fact, he helped cast and coach several of the young actors in Season 4, including the unforgettable boys from the public school storyline, kids who came from broken homes. Just like the characters they played. But Robert's health was fragile. He struggled with weight for years. And in January 2013, at just 52 years old, his heart gave out. The city of Baltimore mourned. His students were devastated, and The Wire lost one of its most authentic voices. There were no scandals, no secret addictions, no tragic headlines, just a man who lived quietly, acted brilliantly, and gave back more than he ever took. In a show built on characters who wanted to rise to the top at any cost. Robert F. Chu was the rare soul who lifted others as he climbed, and never asked for credit. To this day, his performance as Prop Joe remains a masterclass in restraint. He showed us that the most dangerous man in the room isn't always the loudest. Sometimes it's the one who listens, waits, and smiles before making his move. Robert didn't just play the game. He taught it, and in doing so, he became a legend, one whose loss still echoes through the streets he loved. Reg E. Cathey, the velvet voice of a fractured system. There was something about his voice. Deep, smooth, with a kind of authority that didn't need to shout to command the room. Reg E. Cathey could read a menu and make it sound like Shakespeare. On The Wire, he played Norman Wilson, the cool, calculating political operative behind Mayor Carcetti's rise to power. But in real life, Reg's journey was far more complicated and far more compelling. Born on August 18, 1958, in Huntsville, Alabama, Reg was the son of a military officer and grew up all over the world, Germany, the Deep South, and finally, the stage. He studied theater at the University of Michigan and then at the prestigious Yale School of Drama. But he never fit the Hollywood mold. He was too distinct, too intellectual, too real. Before The Wire, he had roles in shows like Oz and Law and Order, often cast as lawyers, professors, or men of quiet strength. But in 2006, when he joined The Wire's 4th season, everything changed. As Norman Wilson, he didn't sling drugs or carry a gun. His weapon was influence. His battlefield was politics. and he navigated it with a smirk that said, "I see through all of this, and I'm still playing the game." Reg was 48 when he joined The Wire, and his performance added a new layer to the show's evolving critique, this time, of political ambition and moral compromise. Norman Wilson wasn't corrupt, he was a realist, and that realism, delivered through Kathy's measured tone and expressive eyes, made the character both magnetic and deeply tragic. Because you sensed that he wanted to do good, but knew better than to believe in it. After The Wire, Reg's career found its renaissance. He earned critical acclaim and even won an Emmy for his role as Freddie Hayes, the soulful barbecue pitmaster in House of Cards. That role, like Norman, showcased Reg's ability to deliver quiet emotional weight, the kind that creeps up on you after the scene is over. But behind the scenes, he was fighting a battle far deadlier than politics. In 2016, Reg was diagnosed with lung cancer. He kept working, kept smiling, kept bringing dignity to every word he spoke. But the disease was relentless. On February 9, 2018, Reg E. Kathy passed away at the age of 59. The tributes poured in, not just from actors and directors, but from fans who felt like they knew him. Because that was his gift. He made you believe. He made you feel. And when he left, it felt like losing a storyteller, a philosopher, a friend. In a show that peeled back the layers of power, Reg played the man who understood how those layers worked, and how often they crushed the people beneath them. His presence in The Wire wasn't loud, but it was lasting. Reg E. Kathy didn't just act in The Wire. He embodied its soul. Melvin Williams, the real kingpin behind the curtain. Most actors in The Wire played criminals. Melvin Williams was one, long before he appeared on screen as the Deacon, the wise, faith-driven mentor who tried to pull young men out of the game. Melvin was the game. He ruled it. In the 1980s, he was known as Little Melvin, one of Baltimore's most notorious drug kingpins. And when he finally stepped into The Wire, it wasn't as a character built from imagination, it was as a ghost of a past he had barely survived. Born on December 14, 1941, Melvin grew up in the Lexington Terrace projects of West Baltimore. He was a numbers runner by the age of 12 and a millionaire by 30. Thanks to a heroin empire that ran deep through the city's veins. He was slick, calculated, untouchable, or so he thought. In 1984, an ambitious DEA agent named Ed Burns finally brought him down. That same Ed Burns would later co-create The Wire with David Simon, the journalist who had covered Melvin's downfall in the Baltimore Sun. Life has a strange way of folding in on itself. Years later, David Simon, the man who once wrote about Melvin's criminal empire, would cast him in the very show inspired by his life. Not as a dealer, not as a gangster, but as a reformed deacon, offering salvation to lost souls in West Baltimore. Art didn't just imitate life, it redeemed it. By the time Melvin joined The Wire, he was in his 60s, far from the man who once wore tailored suits and commanded fear. But there was a quiet power in his performance. When the deacon spoke, it wasn't acting, it was confession. His scenes with Bunny Colvin and Cuddy Wise weren't just plot, they were testimony. His message was simple: you can change, but you'll pay for the life you lived. Melvin Williams died on December 3, 2015, at the age of 73. No tragic overdose, no violent end, just a man, once feared by the city, fading into history. His death didn't make headlines the way his arrests once did, but in the quiet corners of Baltimore, in the hearts of those he mentored after prison, his name still meant something. He was more than a character in The Wire. He was the blueprint, the original, and in the end, he used the very platform shaped by his own sins to speak about redemption. Robert Hogan, the working actor who never stopped fighting. You might not remember the name Louis Sobotka right away. He wasn't a major player, just a quiet, older man standing in the shadows of the docks in Season 2 of The Wire. Part of a crumbling world no one wanted to save. But the man who played him, Robert Hogan, had been on your screen for decades. You just didn't know his name. And maybe, that was the tragedy. Robert Hogan was born on September 28, 1933, in Queens, New York. He wasn't born into fame or privilege. He served in the U.S. Army during the Korean War before studying engineering, but it was acting that pulled him in. By the 1960s, he had become the kind of face that directors trusted and audiences recognized. even if they couldn't place him. He appeared in over 100 television shows: MASH, Gunsmoke, Law and Order, Peyton Place, The Twilight Zone, The Wire, you name it. He was probably in it. He was the definition of a working actor. He didn't chase the spotlight. He just showed up, nailed his scene, and disappeared into the next job. There was dignity in that, but also loneliness. When David Simon cast him as Louis Sobotka, the aging longshoreman and brother of Frank Sobotka, Hogan was already deep into the twilight of his career. He was nearly 70, and yet his performance, brief as it was, carried the weight of a man who had seen too much and survived too little. Louis was not a fighter. He was a bystander to tragedy. And maybe that's why Robert played him so well. But off-screen, Robert was facing a different kind of enemy. In 2013, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, the cruel thief of memory, of identity, of everything a performer holds sacred. His family kept the diagnosis private. But over time, the disease progressed. He could no longer act, could no longer recall the lines he once delivered with ease. On May 27, 2021, Robert Hogan passed away at the age of 87. No drug scandal, no shocking headlines, just silence. The kind of silence that comes when a man who was always just off camera finally fades from the frame completely. He never won an Emmy. He never headlined a blockbuster. But Robert Hogan was part of the DNA of television. A craftsman, a survivor, and in The Wire, he became part of something timeless, a show that honored stories like his. Filled with people history forgets but who shaped everything just the same. Tom Quinn, the detective who lived in the margins. He didn't headline the show. He didn't steal scenes or drop unforgettable monologues. But Tom Quinn was there, in the background, in the corners, watching, waiting, playing Detective Patrick Mahan with the quiet competence of a man who'd been there and done that. Both in character and in life. Born in 1934 in the working-class streets of Queens, New York, Tom Quinn wasn't the kind of actor who chased Hollywood dreams. He was the kind who built his craft from the ground up. In dim-lit theaters and underpaid off-Broadway shows. Acting wasn't a career for him, it was a calling. A trade, something sacred that had nothing to do with fame. He didn't get his first major television credit until he was well into his 40s. By the time The Wire came calling in the early 2000s, Tom was already a seasoned veteran of television bit parts and regional theater. He joined the cast as Patrick Mahan, a weary homicide detective who wasn't there to shine, just to do the job. And that's exactly what Tom did. His appearances in The Wire were brief, just 3 episodes, but he brought with him a kind of authentic weight that shows like this desperately needed. He wasn't an actor playing a cop. He was a man who understood what it meant to carry a badge, and the moral compromises it demanded. Off-screen, Tom Quinn was never far from the stage. Long after other actors his age had retired, he was still performing, still auditioning, still grinding. But time, as it does, took its toll. He suffered from complications related to diabetes and declining health in his later years. On January 5, 2014, Tom Quinn passed away at the age of 79. His death didn't trend. It didn't go viral. There were no flashy tributes. Just a quiet obit in a local paper, noting the passing of a man who had spent a lifetime disappearing into other people's stories. But The Wire was built on actors like Tom Quinn. People who didn't crave the spotlight but who made the world of the show feel real. Men who could step into a scene and make it richer by their presence alone. Tom Quinn may have lived in the margins of the industry. But in The Wire, even the margins mattered. And his life, like his performance, reminds us that sometimes the most honest voices come from those who never raised theirs. Lance Reddick, the tragic commander behind the badge. Lance Reddick was never just another actor on screen. He was a presence, sharp, magnetic, and unshakably composed. Born on December 31, 1962, in Baltimore, Maryland, Reddick's life was steeped in complexity long before he ever donned the uniform of Cedric Daniels in The Wire. Raised in a modest, religious family, music was his first passion. He studied at the prestigious Eastman School of Music and dreamed of being a classical composer. But fate had other plans. In his 30s, he pivoted, first to theater, then to television, with a quiet determination that would become his signature. When The Wire began filming in 2001, Reddick was 39 years old. He had already seen the gritty side of the entertainment industry, typecasting, rejections, and missed chances. But his role as Lieutenant Cedric Daniels changed everything. Tall, angular, and intensely cerebral, Reddick embodied Daniels with a silent fury. His eyes did more acting than most performers manage with monologues. And the irony? He almost didn't get the part. Originally, he auditioned for Bunk Moreland. But the producers saw something different in him, a coiled energy, a restrained power, and handed him the badge of a man caught between law and loyalty. It fit like it was written for him. Critics hailed his performance as one of The Wire's moral anchors. Viewers saw him as a man walking a tightrope between ambition and integrity. But behind the scenes, Reddick was more than the stoic Daniels. He was known for his dry humor, his intense privacy, and a professionalism so fierce it bordered on obsession. He reportedly never broke character on set. Some co-stars found him intimidating. Others revered him. After The Wire, Reddick could have coasted. Instead, he reinvented. From roles in Fringe, Bosch, to the John Wick franchise, he carved a space that defied Hollywood's pigeonholes. He played villains, allies, and bureaucrats with a grace that blurred the lines. Yet, fame never seemed to seduce him. He stayed married to his wife Stephanie, shunned red carpets, and rarely gave interviews about his personal life. But not all was serene beneath the surface. There were whispers that Reddick battled chronic pain, that he struggled with the physical demands of action roles in silence. In March 2023, the shocking news broke. Lance Reddick had died suddenly of heart disease. He was just 60 years old. Fans were stunned, friends were blindsided, and Hollywood? It lost one of its most quietly revolutionary talents. There were no drugs, no scandals, no downward spiral, just a man who gave everything to his craft until the very end. His last role, fittingly, was in John Wick, Chapter 4, a film about loyalty, legacy, and loss. He never got to see its release. Some say the good die young. In Reddick's case, the enigmatic did. He left behind a legacy not built on headlines but on gravity. You felt him when he entered a scene. You trusted him, even when his character walked gray lines. And maybe that's what made Lance Reddick so unforgettable. He was real, rare, and remarkably unshaken, until the end. The Wire wasn't a show. It was a mirror. And when we looked into it, we didn't see actors on a stage, we saw ourselves. Our cities, our failures. And now, so many of the souls who brought that mirror to life are gone. MichaelKWilliams, consumed by the same demons his character fought to escape. Robert F. Chu, the quiet master who taught a generation of young actors what truth looked like. Reg E. Cathy, a voice that could move mountains. Silenced by a disease that doesn't care about brilliance. Melvin Williams, the kingpin turned prophet, whose real life was more dramatic than fiction ever dared. And the others, forgotten by headlines, but unforgettable to those who listened. They weren't just names on a call sheet. They were architects of something brutal and beautiful. They breathed life into characters society would rather ignore. And in doing so, they forced us to confront the systems we pretend don't exist. But here's the truth the industry won't say out loud. The Wire didn't kill these actors. But it came from the same world that did. Poverty, addiction, obscurity, injustice. For many of them, the show wasn't just a job, it was therapy. It was confession. It was dangerous. And now, they're gone. Some in silence, some in scandal, some in pain. What remains is a masterpiece painted with their blood, their flaws, and their genius. So when someone tells you The Wire was just a TV show, remember this. Real people paid a real price to tell those stories. And many never got their happy ending. If you want to honor them, do more than watch, remember. And if you want to keep uncovering the truths behind the legends, subscribe to this channel. Because this is where the spotlight turns after the curtain falls.